Hello everyone, welcome to the water pollution workshop. I'm so glad to have you here. So I'm Mariam Salehi, I'm assistant professor in civil engineering at the University of Memphis. Today we are going to have a short review on the fundamental concepts regarding the water pollution, and we are going to review a couple of the activities that you can conduct with your students in your class. So if it's possible, I want to go over the room, and we don't have the actual room, but the virtual room, and introduce yourself. So, Son, do you want to start?
I am Sue-Ann Sprunger. I teach at Millington Central High School. I teach 7th and 8th grade STEM, and I teach honors chemistry and AP biology and AP physics.
Great, thank you. Jermaine?
Oh, there I am. Hi, everyone. My name is Jermaine Johnson, and I'm an instructive coordinator at the University of Memphis Chemistry Department.
Great.
He does a lot of awesome outreach, so he may be able to use this.
Cool.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Great. Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a STEM ambassador with the West Tennessee STEM Hub, and I'm a student at the University of Memphis in biomedical engineering.
Great. Madison?
I'm Madison, and I'm a civil engineering major at the University of Memphis and a STEM ambassador.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So we need to protect the quality of our water bodies and streams, because we need to protect those streams because many of those can serve as the drinking water sources for us. Many of them are supporting the agricultural activity, the recreation activity, or even tourism. So we need to protect our fresh water to support the other activities that conducted, and they are relying on the fresh water. We also need to protect our water because lots of organisms and animals are living in the fresh water, and we need to protect the ecosystem for those. There are several basic water quality parameters that are important in terms of healthy freshwater system. One of them is pH. We have alkalinity, conductivity, dissolved oxygen, nitrate and phosphate, temperature and turbidity. The students generally, they know about the pH, but these water quality parameters are kind of customized to freshwater system, or even the drinking water, the sources for drinking water. So we are going to learn what are these definitions. So pH measures the hydrogen ion concentration in the water. So it's important that for the fresh water, we need to have the appropriate range of pH. If we have the low pH or very high pH, we are going to result in the death of animals or some of the organisms that are living in the water. So pH is influencing on solubility of many heavy metals in the water. So if we have the low pH and we have the acidic condition, we are going to dissolve several of the heavy metals like copper in the water, and we are going to make that a toxic environment for many of the organisms that are living in the water. So we need to have the appropriate range of pH. The other parameter is the alkalinity. So alkalinity is the buffering capacity of the water. So it shows that how much water, how much we can have resistance toward the change of pH and reduction of the pH. It's important because definitely you heard about the acid rain. So if our stream or fresh water doesn't have the good level of alkalinity, it doesn't have good resistance against the acid rain. So when we have the acid rain, we are going to have significant drop in the pH, and then the pH of the stream can go below the required range of the pH for the aquatic life. And then we are going to put the aquatic life in that water stream in danger. So alkalinity is very important factor. And even in some of the fresh waters, because of the low alkalinity and the risk of acid rain, they are just adding some lime to the water to increase its alkalinity. The other parameter that is important for the fresh water is the conductivity. So it shows that how much water sample can conduct the electricity, and it is an indirect measure of the total dissolved solid in the water sample. It's important because if we have high level of dissolved solid, like high level of salt in the water, that's not the appropriate environment for the fish because they cannot keep the water in their body. So we can monitor conductivity. It's so easy. We have the probe and we just, it's super quick, and we can indirectly measure the level of total dissolved solid in the water samples. And you can just stop me anytime and if you have any questions. The other important parameter for the fresh water is the level of dissolved oxygen. So that shows the amount of oxygen which is dissolved in the water. So you know that for the fish and many of aquatic organisms, dissolved oxygen is critical. So we need to have appropriate level of dissolved oxygen in the water. So if we have the low level of dissolved oxygen, we are going to result in the mortality for the fish and aquatic organisms. The other criteria that we can measure for the freshwater or stormwater is the nitrate, the concentration of nitrate and phosphate. So these are the measure of the amount of fertilizers that are added to the water. So for example, we are using the fertilizer for our garden, and then we have the rain. So rain is washing those fertilizer into the water, and then we are going to end up with having nitrate and phosphate in the water. You know that these are essential for the plant, but if we have excess level of those in the water, we are going to result in something like algal bloom, and it's going to negatively impact the aquatic life. Because you know, when you have those algae growing because of excessive level of fertilizers, they are going to block the sunlight from penetrating into the water, and they are going to decompose. And when they decompose, they are using the dissolved oxygen in the water. They reduce the dissolved oxygen, and even we might have some of the toxic algae that are releasing some of the toxic material, and they can endanger the source of drinking water. Okay, any question? No. Other parameter that is important for the fresh water is temperature. So temperature controls the dissolved oxygen concentration in the water, and it influences the rate of chemical and biological reactions in the water. So if we have the higher temperature for the water, we are going to have lower level of dissolved oxygen, and that may influence the aquatic life. And many of chemical and biological reactions are controlled by temperature. So when we have the higher temperature, we are accelerating many type of chemical reactions. The other parameter, which is very important for the surface water, is the turbidity. So it shows the level of clarity of the water, and it is measured by the amount of light scattering caused by suspended particles in the water. So turbidity could influence the fish and aquatic life because it prevents the light penetration into the water, and it's going to influence the photosynthesis process. Turbidity is also important because if you are using the surface water as the source of our drinking water, when we have higher turbidity, the water treatment plant, they need to adjust their treatment practices to remove this turbidity. And the turbidity is changing, fluctuating. For example, if we have a rainy day, after that, we are going to have higher turbidity in the surface water. And then water treatment plants, they need to adjust their treatment practices because they got higher turbidity after the rain. So I sent you a lesson plan. It's about interpreting the water quality data. So you should have this file. So this is about interpreting the water chemical quality data. So first we have the definition, so it can be distributed between the students. We have the definition for all of these, what they need. And then we have some graphs. So students, they can work on the graph and then they can discuss and share their result with each other. So we don't have time to go over all of them, but Jermaine, could you go over your graph?
Sure. In terms of my graph, it was comparing water that had high alkalinity and low alkalinity. And if you look at the black line is based on the water sample with high alkalinity. And you'll notice that the pH doesn't reach above, say, 8 in terms of its alkalinity. And the graph is starting from early in the morning to the peak in terms of late afternoon, and then back to early in the morning. The subtle difference is that with low alkalinity, there is a spike in terms of pH. So there is a wide range ranging from, say, 4.5 in terms of its pH early in the morning, and then rising all the way to 10.5. And then going back down again in terms of the early morning. So there is a cycle where the peak is at the late afternoon. But this again shows the relationship with having a high alkalinity and treating it more as a buffer in terms of maintaining this pH level versus the absence of it.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So you have the lesson plan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me see. Okay, so stormwater, one of the concerns regarding pollution of freshwater stream is contamination that's caused by stormwater. So stormwater is generated when we have the rain or we have the snow melt. So it can go through the soil and it's going to basically accumulate lots of contaminants and then transport them to the freshwater systems. So when we have the natural environment, we have infiltration. So the stormwater is penetrating into the soil. But when we have the built environment, so for example, when we have the pavement, road, parking lot, water cannot penetrate rapidly into the surface. So we are going to have the water that is running on the surface and it's just picking up the pollutant as it goes. So we can have some organic pollutants, heavy metals, just transported by stormwater. So some of this stormwater goes to the storm drain. And the problem with the stormwater is that in many of the cities, like Memphis, stormwater is not going to the wastewater treatment plant. it goes directly to the streams or river. So it doesn't undergo any type of treatment. So if we have any contaminants, the contaminant will end up just in the fresh water. We are going to have several problems with the stormwater flooding. Many of you have maybe experienced. We have the pollution. We mentioned that they're just picking up the pollutant and transporting the pollutant from one location to the other location. And we may have the stream bank erosion. So when we have the forces of water exceeding the forces that keeping the soil in the structure, we are going to have erosion of the soil into the streams. So have you, any of you, have you experienced any problem with the water after the rain event or a storm event? No?
Repeat that question one more time. I'm sorry.
Have you experienced any sort of problems after the storm event, like flooding or, big puddles around, something
Right.
like?
Yeah, I've had issues, even growing up and even in Memphis, issues with heavy flooding, generating a lot of, flooding around the house, around the streets. Maybe storage drains have been backed up with leaves or grass that have been, blocking the area. And also, even when you're talking about the dirt or even the soil just running down or sinking because of flooding, that's also been a problem I've seen.
Yeah, exactly. These are some sort of problems that created by a storm runoff. And we are going to have lots of, pollutant in the storm water. We can have nutrients, sediments, heavy metals, some toxic material. We can have bacteria or viruses, oil and grease, some floatable waste like plastic litter. We may have some construction waste and BOD and COD substances that are some sort of organic matter that are present in the storm water. So we may have lots of these pollutants, and then the storm water is going to contaminate the fresh water. So we can conduct an activity, and actually you're not here, so I do this activity by myself. So I have some of these markers that they are water soluble, and I have a piece of paper. So I just mark with the, markers. Each color could represent one type of contaminant. So I just color that. So each one could be one of the contaminants, and the paper could be considered as the ground surface. Okay, so I have this, and this is considered as the ground surface. So I just remember that, because the surface of the ground is not flat, so we have elevation. So I consider this as the surface of the ground. I place it on the container, something like this. See? So I have this, and then I just spray the water. So the water represents the rain. So I just spray the water. So you cannot see that. Let's see. I can move my camera later. So I just spray with water on top of that, and then you can see here. You can see. So these are the contaminants, and with this activity, you can show the students how the contaminants that are accumulated on the ground could end up in the rainwater, and all of the contaminants could be mixed up together, all of them in the water, and you see that the water is going from the elevation to the deep location and just accumulating like the puddle. So that's just simple activity that you can conduct in the classroom to show the students how contaminants are washed off by the stormwater from the ground surface. Okay. So, and there are some, some question and discussion follow up this activity. When we are talking about the pollution that's caused by stormwater, we have the point sources pollution and non-point sources pollution. For the point sources pollution, there are some single identifiable source that is releasing the pollution. So we know exactly what is the source of pollution. It could be a pipe, it could be a factory. So we call that point sources pollution. So for example, these are the effluent from the wastewater treatment plant that are releasing to the river. So this is the point source pollution. Or here we have the untreated animal waste that could be released from a farm. So when we have the rain, we have the animal waste. So some of these, nutrient and pathogens that are present in the animal waste could be washed off into the storm water. Both of them are considered as the point sources pollution. We have the regulation that controls the point sources pollution, and all of the locations that are releasing the pollution to the water of United States, they need to have appropriate permits. So for example, industrial facilities, they need to have the appropriate permit so they can discharge the pollutant to the water of United States. But on the other hand, we have the non-point sources pollution. So they can, we cannot identify the exact sources of that pollution. So they can originate from the land runoff, precipitation, we can have the atmospheric deposition, drainage. All of these are considered as the non-point sources pollutants. So when we have the rainwater, for example, across the street, road, it's just washing off the pollutant out of the street or out of the parking lot, and it's generating the non-point sources pollution. So some of this water is directly going to the river or lake, and some of that just going through the storm drain and then just directly dumped into the freshwater streams. The problem is that with non-point sources pollutant, it's difficult to control that because we don't know exactly where is the source. So you see here, for example, we have the residential area, we have the commercial area, industry, we have the vehicles, we have the road, the contaminant that are releasing around the road. We have the agricultural site, we have the landfill, we have the littering. So this one is focused on the plastic pollutant that's released by the runoff, but we can consider all sorts of the pollutant that are releasing in the urban area could end up with the stormwater into the freshwater streams. Okay. So nationwide, we have more than 85% of the rivers and streams and 80% of the reservoirs and lakes polluted by the non-point sources pollutants. So that's a big problem. So let's see how these pollutants are released to the urban environment. So fertilizer and herbicides, all of us are using the fertilizer, herbicides, pesticides for maintaining our lawn. So excessive application of those could result in pollution of storm water. Actually, I found this interesting photo that shows that we may fertilize the stream as well. And that shows that what we are releasing to the lawn is going to come up in the stream, and we are going to put the aquatic life in danger by excessive application of fertilizers. We have oil, grease, and toxic chemicals that are released by motor vehicle. You may see, some of this oil that are releasing in the parking lots when people are parking their vehicles. And this is, it has lots of organic matter present in the oil. We have the construction site. One of the major problems with the construction sites is erosion and releasing lots of sediment out of the construction site. And when we have the rainwater, the rain droplets are separating the soil particles and releasing those to the stormwater. And the main practice to minimize releasing of sediments and minimize the erosion from construction site is using the fences. And you may see, many of construction sites, they have some fences around the area to prevent releasing of these sediments to the water. We have bacteria, viruses, and nutrients from livestock and pet waste that released into the water. And I found that, one report mentioned that in 1 gram of dog waste, there are more than 23 millions of E. coli bacteria. So that's a huge amount of bacteria in addition to the bacteria and viruses that are present in the pet waste. We may have some nutrient. So it's important that people clean after their pets. Road salt in the area that, they're experiencing very harsh winter, they are using salt to melt the ice on the road. And salt, it has chloride. So we have sodium chloride, and we are going to increase the chloride concentration in the stormwater that is generated by melting the snow. So chloride is super, it's highly dissolved in the water, and it's super difficult to remove the chloride from water. So we need to consider appropriate application of road salts. We have the heavy metals that are releasing by roof shingles, motor vehicles, and other sources. Some metals like copper, lead are releasing by the vehicles. And when we have the rain event, they are going to be washed into the rain and come up in the storm water. We have the thermal pollution from the impervious surfaces. So you can see when we have the asphalt and pavement surface, they are going to absorb the light, and they are going to increase the temperature for the water, and increasing the temperature could result some stresses on aquatic life. So, all of these consequences, we need to do something to resolve that or mitigate that. So we need to apply the stormwater quality management practices, which involves the control, capture, and treatment of storm water. So for example, we have the storm drain. We need to keep the litter, pet waste, leaves, and debris out of the storm drain, because as I mentioned, they are not undergoing any type of treatment, and everything directly is going to the river or a stream. We need to protect the compost yard. Many people doing the composting in their backyard, but they need to protect that from rain, because rain is going to wash the contaminant like nutrient or pathogens out of this compost yard. For the lawn and gardens, we need to apply the appropriate amount of pesticide and fertilizers. Many people can send their soil sample to the extension offices and ask them for testing, and then they can identify the appropriate amount of fertilizer. And even when we are applying the fertilizer, it's better that we don't apply that right before the rain, because if we apply that and then it's rainy, everything is going to come up in the rain and in the storm water. So it's better that we don't apply that before the rain. If we have any type of spill, we need to clean up before it's end up in the storm water. Erosion of the soil is one of the significant problems. So vegetation and applying the vegetation is one of the best practices to limit erosion of the soil. And then one of the sources of pollution is the septic tanks. Some of the septic tanks are not working well, and they may leach some of the contaminant into the soil, and eventually they can contaminate the water. So it's better that people check their septic tank regularly to make sure that it's not leaking and it doesn't have any problem. So one of the activities that can be conducted regarding the stormwater and the influence on land is to identify the water flow and infiltration through the land. So a student can, you can take the students somewhere outside of the building and ask them to draw the boundaries of selected area. They can identify the different type of building, identify if the surface is pervious or impervious, and then they can identify the landscape, and they can identify the location that water could be collected, like pond. And after these, they can identify the area that water might be collected, and they can discuss different types of pollutants that are present in that area, which eventually could end up in the stormwater. And after all of discussion and providing the documentation by students, the teacher can just pour 1 gallon of water at different surfaces, and they can follow the water flow through that area and see how water is infiltrated through the surface. They can discuss the impervious and pervious surface, and they can discuss the type of pollutants that are transported by that water. Okay, any question for this? Okay, so in Tennessee, we have significant problem with the non-point sources pollution. And we have the Tennessee Department of Agriculture that administrates the non-point sources program in Tennessee. So for example, in Shelby County, we have more than 90 streams, more than 700 miles that are listed as the impaired water. So common pollutants are the erosions that caused by livestock. So they just use the vegetation, and then we have the siltation and erosion of the sediments. The other problem is pathogen input into the water stream that could be due to the grazing and malfunctioning septic tank. So these two are the major problems in Tennessee. So this is the website that I provided here. This is provided by EPA, and it has for different states. So these are the stories for Tennessee. So these are the success stories. So that shows the problem with the stormwater contamination and how they solve it. So they call that success stories. So you can assign, there are lots of stories there and they are simple. So you can assign, for example, one story to a couple of the students and ask them to identify the problem and see how they resolve it. So for example, this is the problem for this case was the silt that was entering the water body during the agricultural practices. And to solve that, they installed some fencing and they use another watering facility for the livestock. So there are lots of success stories. You can ask the student to read those, identify the problem and how they resolve it. So I provided you the link in the last slide. You can just download the file. They are 1 page or 2 pages stories. And after this, we are going to our future educational activity regarding the non-point sources pollution is our full day workshop. We are going to have much more hands-on activity and more detailed lesson plans. And we are going to introduce the student project because eventually we are going to conduct a student project for different students team from different schools. And then they are going to have presentation and the educational expo. So we are going to keep you updated about what's going on. These are some resources. You can just find out, you can just use the link and you can find out more information. There are some lesson plans, some activities, and some background information. So you can use these additional sources. And this workshop was supported by STEM Hub and the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. Let me know if you have any question, and we have the survey. So this is exactly the same survey, but this is the post-workshop survey because we want to find out that how much the information was effective. So you can use the same link and use your applicant ID, the same number that you selected in the beginning, and fill out the survey. But before you fill out the survey, just let me know if you have any question, anything.
The full workshops, how often do you have them? Or when is the next one?
We are going to have full workshop. I guess it should be in summer.
Summer, okay.
We are going to have 2 full workshops in summer. So one of that is going to be for the Memphis area, for the teachers in Memphis area, and the other one will be for the teachers in Jackson area. But we are going to have 2 full workshops in the beginning of summer because we are going to start our student project in summer as well. Any other questions? Thank you for attending, and please fill out the survey.